All right, now to help make sense of what is happening with the European political leaders, we're joined by Mr. James Jackson, who's a defense journalist and also a political analyst, and he's joining us live from Valencia in Spain. Mr. Jackson, thank you very much indeed for taking time out and speaking to us here on WION. You know, let me in fact start off by asking you this. This is a pretty complex situation at this moment, literally from the United Kingdom to France to Germany and Spain. All the leaders who are in charge are facing domestic political crises of their own. With that being the case, do you think Europe can present a united front when it is confronted with the bigger crises that you're looking at, like the war in Ukraine and also the West Asia crisis? What's your assessment on this?
I think there are a lot of different things in play here, as you mentioned yourself. Of course, there are geopolitical challenges, and Europe is dealing with some of them better than it is with others, let's say. But what we've really seen is this year there's been a huge anti-incumbent wave across the Western world, which actually many economists would say is based on inflation, that old beast that we thought we had defeated, but which rose up after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and which reminded us of how important people's pockets are for day-to-day politics. So when the prices of milk, butter and everything else is going up and up, and wages aren't, that tends to make people dissatisfied with politics, because, you know, your day-to-day expenses are actually very important for how satisfied you are with the world. No one wants to have less money at the end of the month. Europe has not done the best job at fighting inflation. How it could have, given its proximity to Russia and the amount by which certain members of the Western Bloc, like Germany, were dependent on Russian gas for such a long time, is questionable. In the US as well. I mean, many analysts now are saying that Kamala Harris's only chance wasn't this sort of woke campaign that she put out there, or even this idea of bringing Republicans alongside, but going hawkishly against inflation. And we're not seeing that from Europe's centre-left leaders. And I think if we don't see that from them, we'll see them swept out of office because they're not able to keep people's money in people's pockets.
Right. It's interesting that you were saying that a lot of this, the crisis that you're looking at in the European leadership, has predominantly got to do with inflation. A lot of people will turn around and say that inflation is up because there is a war that is raging in Ukraine, which has driven up the price of gas for a lot of people in Ukraine. Now, the other point that you made is that these are centrist and left-leaning leaders. The question that I want to ask you is twofold. Firstly, do you think the right-wing leaders could have done anything differently to ease the problem of inflation for people in Europe? And secondly, with Donald Trump again back in charge at the White House, who's talking of an isolationist agenda for the United States of America, do you think the problems for Europe will compound with leaders who are grappling with political crises in their respective nations?
I really don't think that right-wing parties would have done anything differently or anything more beneficial. I think in European politics, we do often see different waves. So we had a bit of a red wave with the election of Keir Starmer, Olaf Scholz's government a few years ago, Pedro Sanchez, who's been in power for a bit longer now, and they happen to have quite bad timing, and timing is everything in politics, because no one, when they were elected, expected to be dealing with a war on their footstep, and in many cases it wasn't a war that they had, a war on their doorstep rather, and it wasn't a war which they had prepared for, and in many cases they had actually contributed to the situations which caused it. I'm thinking particularly of the SPD in Germany, which pursued very Russia-friendly gas policies. So the question is, what about Donald Trump in the US? I actually really believe that, to come on to the second part of your question, we've already seen that he's pivoting away from this inflation-busting question, and his proposal of putting tariffs on his neighbours, as well as, of course, Europe, will mean that in the US, prices will go up for consumers. So that is further inflation. So this protectionist agenda will not help ordinary Americans, considering what American manufacturing looks like now. This isn't the 90s. We're living in a very much a globalized economy, even more so than we were then. So the idea that you can simply close the grain curtain,
Right.
and grow everything at home is very tricky, and that's going to make things more expensive, and then you're at risk of annoying your voters. So in Europe, where people are being very isolated geopolitically with Trump's election, they did not prepare for it anywhere near as much as they could have. And with Russia looking like it's gaining ground in Ukraine, it seems like, Europe is feeling attacked from both sides, although, of course, or at least possibly attacked from one side, and then isolated from the other side. So it's a lonely time, and it's a lonely time for European centre-left leaders, many of whom are likely to be turfed out of office quite quickly. I'm thinking in particular of Olaf Scholz.
Interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Jackson, for joining us and giving us a very comprehensive assessment of how you see the picture evolving in this very complex politics that we're looking at evolving in Europe. Thank you very much indeed for joining us in Valencia. Thank you.